Hey everyone, welcome to part 4 of the VW Bus EV conversion playlist. And in this video, what we'll accomplish here is building a railing system back here so that I can mount all my components into the gas tank area of the bus. As you can see, I'll have the mounting of the vacuum pump, the DC to DC converter, the controller, the high voltage contactor box, the main cutoff switch, and even the main battery charger, all mounted and ready to go. So stay tuned to see how I did it. You know, this shelf right here is where the gas tank was on, and then the filler went up through the side of the car. And then there was a panel that you could see those Phillips head screws there. The panel kind of covered it. There was like a, you know, and I have that panel. And I thought, oh, maybe I can just mount my controller and components to that. The problem is that panel is a little bit thin sheet metal and these things are a bit heavy. And the other problem with that is my command center would get in the way of that, because if this hangs down a little bit, I only have like 6 inches right here, which isn't much. I keep thinking in my head when I'm dreaming about this at night, as you guys all do with our restoration projects, it always seems bigger to me, but it really is not. There's only about 10 inches of space between my fingers right here, between the bottom and the top. Now, as you go in, it kind of, this shelf kind of dips in, so which gives you more like 11 and a half inches after the dip. So what I'm thinking, though, to do this is I'm not going to use that sheet metal panel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build a framing, a galvanized steel framing that's going to go across here, but it's going to be inset so that the controller, because the controller itself is about 5 inches tall, so if it hangs vertically, it's going to have 5 inches of depth. And what I want it to do is kind of be kind of flush with where that panel would be, but I need it 5 inches, the framing that it mounts to, about 5 inches in at least. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. Now, how wide is this whole thing? Well, it's almost 3 feet wide. And let's just say we have, I'm going to call it like, say, 32 inches comfortably from here to here. I'm going by about 32 inches, even though we might have a little more. And let's get what I'm going to see. So basically 32 by 10 or 11 if you're kind of going back into there. So let's see how I'm going to make that work. Okay, so I mocked up here on my table approximately 32 inches, and I just put these papers down to kind of mock it up. And this is what I'm thinking will go on that framing that I talked about. And again, it's going to look like this. It's going to be framed vertically, where these things are held vertically in that gas tank area. And so this will be my controller and my main contactor box. This is an 8x8 by 4.5 box. And I think this is going to work for me. If I have to buy another one, they're about 35 bucks. I'll do that. But this one has only a few holes in it, and I think I can make it work. We'll see. So here's what I'm thinking. Now, how am I going to build the frame? The idea that I have now is buying this. Now, this is a unirail. I think that's what they call this. Let me see if I can get a sticker. It's called a unirail or unistrut. I think they call it unistrut. But anyway, it's a 1 5/8 by 13 16ths, and it's a 10-foot piece. And this is made by a company, let's see, called Phoenix, but, you know, Home Depot or whatever, they have different, you know, companies that make these type of things. This is in the plumbing or electrical section of the store, and the reason it is used in plumbing and electrical is, and you've seen this before in buildings, these unistruts are this, it's a slotted, heavy-duty galvanized rail, a steel rail, and it's slotted such that you can cut it into different sections and you can mount things to it. And the systems come with all sorts of different types of mounting hardware and fasteners. So this one, for example, is like a spring-loaded 3/8 inch threaded rod. They make them in 1/4 inch threaded, 1/2 inch threaded. But the spring-loaded, you push it in here and you can slide it anywhere you want. And then, but it stays kind of where you want it to go. And then you can screw in mount your hardware to that. In plumbing and electrical, a lot of times these are used horizontally like this, where you would have threaded rods that would hang it in like a joist bay or something, and you can do like I said, you can do those nuts. You can also do like threaded U rods for running conduits, organizing your conduit or your plumbing across it and holding it in place. Or a lot of times it's used to mount vertically to walls. And then, of course, you can use those nut inserts to mount heavy things like wall-mounted combination boilers or tankless water heaters or what have you. It's very sturdy and it can hold a ton of weight. Now, this was a about $34 for a 10-foot piece, so it's not cheap, but if I cut it into 32-inch sections plus a few like 10, 11-inch sections for the uprights, you know, to put in as framing to hold it all together, this will cover everything I need it to do, and then I'll probably just buy a few more packs of these mounting hardware as I need. So what I'm going to do is run a 32-inch rail across the top, and that'll catch my contactor box and my controller. And I also thought I can mount my water-cooled tank as well to this. And even potentially, I was thinking, even as I'm thinking about how this I'll have area behind this where I can run like tubing and wiring that I don't want to see, you know, like so the tubing to the ports can go behind it so you don't have to see it. And also I thought, well, if I could do that, I might be able to fit in my vacuum pump and have just pretty much all this stuff mounted to this railing system. In addition to that, so since this is galvanized, I was thinking about welding the uprights and the box frame together, but I thought, well, since it's galvanized, I don't really want to risk my health if you weld on galvanized, which is essentially just like zinc coated steel. That the zinc fumes from welding is bad for you. So not that I wouldn't do it. I could hold my breath, do the plug weld, walk away, let it air out, and go like that. But they make all sorts of fittings. They make these heavy-duty flat bar fittings that are like flat L's, so you can do L's. And they also make standard L bracing, so I can, you know, mount it to here and L bracket it and mount it at the top. Okay, well, here is the mock-up. Everything's just clamped and kind of bolted loosely into place, but I created a cardboard template for the bolt pattern on the controller. As far as the spacing on the top and bottom rail, it's 100% depending on the controller bolt pattern, because that's the only piece that is solid aluminum, and I can't change that. Everything else that I'm bolting on is really starting at the top, and then, you know, it's kind of configurable. I can drill different size ears for this, so it's really just this that I care about. But the other thing is the template's not enough, because the bolt pattern just shows you that you've got it able to bolt in, but it doesn't kind of tell you, well, the depth of it, where these things are going to fall, these ports that you have to clip into, and these wires and things like that. So I did hold it up, and it does look good. Those ports are all going to be facing down, the wiring stuff, so it's possible I might have to drill an extra 3/4 inch hole with a grommet so that cables will go up through the bottom and plug into those things. But there's plenty of room to do that, and nothing's going to be jammed up. So I think this is the final thing. I'm going to go ahead and tighten off those bolts. I've marked the bottom stuff here, so I'll start drilling those bottom plates out and tightening up those bolts, and then I'll get my measurements for the cross members that are going to go right there and right there. And if I need one in the middle, I'll put one in the middle. But I'm hoping that I don't need to do an extra one, because it just adds more weight. Well, it probably seems simple when you're watching it on video, but this was such a pain. You can see I've got a mess of tools, one broken drill bit, and I've got it all pretty much dry fit and installed. I even have those bolt holes drilled there, up there to mount it to the rail, up there and down there. So everything's drilled out to the spec it needs, and things are at least dry fit in. So what I did was I tightened all these other bolts, besides the ones that are actually attaching it to the car. I tightened them all down because there was a lot of, movement and stuff that had to happen, loosening and retightening and getting it to fit. And so now that that's all tightened, it can come out all in one piece again. I'm going to do one more dry fit with the actual controller, because who knows, maybe this isn't quite square anymore and that cardboard template's just folding. But I'm going to check one more time, and then I'm going to go ahead and start sanding and wiping it down for a primer, and I'm going to go ahead and get that painted. The next step is to clean and prime and paint it. One thing to note is that the Unirail stuff is all galvanized or zinc plated. Zinc plated. All the hardware is kind of grade 8 or grade 5 zinc plated hardware, and the plates that connect it are zinc plated. The only thing that's painted are these brackets, these black brackets. So I've got lots of different stuff. A lot of it's zinc plated, and what I've heard to prep zinc plating for paint is, I would imagine that a standard kind of solvent prep for painting would probably work, but this stuff is expensive and I'm running kind of low on it. I read that either ammonia or white vinegar, it's kind of acidic white vinegar, rubbing that down and then probably just doing some Zep degreaser would probably do the same thing. So I'm going to use that Scotch-Brite sponge and scrub it down with vinegar and then degreaser, and that should be all the prep I need. All right, I got the frame basically painted. It's not the actual body color. I just did some rattle can, just some generic white color, some rattle can paint, and put some primer and a few coats on that. And I'll likely have to touch it up again or maybe respray it with the body color when it gets warm enough to do HVLP spraying, but this is good enough for now. Got all the hardware here, the two top bolts, just zinc plated stuff. These are actually stainless steel because they'll be mounting the bottom, and I've also, so that's all stainless steel, but I think it's a 3/8 inch bolt, but I've also got a piece of rubber under there, so that's going to go on the bottom underneath the gas shelf there. So that piece of rubber there is to keep it all watertight, because this is going to bolt through that gas tank shelf there. There it is, starting to come together. I'm really loving the look of that warp controller. That just looks killer. And there's the contactor high voltage box. Kind of emptied it out just to kind of see, because I definitely need to reconfigure everything, that whole layout. And then the tank, and again I was going to show the pump right between there. But as I'm laying stuff out, I noticed a problem. Can you spot a problem? Potential maintenance issue here? How am I going to get fluid into that? The cap is 1 inch from the top of there. So I could move it down and put a cross brace and move it down here, but then that nipple would be against the bottom here. So I'd have to, I could tee it and kind of try to center it, but now I'm thinking, well, maybe I should just review my layout again. All right, I think I like this a lot. So I did read the instructions, and this is an acceptable mounting option. Pretty much you can mount the vacuum pump any which way, so mounting it on its side is perfectly acceptable. That means that the vacuum tubing can come out of the original location and loop back over to there. DC to DC converter, it's going to need another mounting point. Either I'll just get one of those little rail, those thick 1/8 inch steel rail pieces, and just put it up there and catch that bottom bolt and just have it bolted on 3 ways. Or I'll build an entire another rail with those 2 joiner pieces, because it looks like it lines up really well with that hole right there to center a rail all the way down. I still have plenty of rail left, so I may just do that. So I'm going to go ahead and buy a couple more of those pieces. just 2 of those joiner pieces, so it only cost me like $5 or $6 to do that. But I'm liking that. I think I've figured out, you know, like it's minus the coolant reservoir, I think I've figured out all the placement of our major components back in the engine bay here, with the exception of possibly the main shutoff switch. And the last time you saw it mounted in here, there was a main shutoff switch, but that made this box pretty cramped, and I want to get the high voltage part of the DC to DC converter, like relay and fusing and stuff like that, inside of here. And so that might be a little cramped. But what I thought was, and this is pretty cool, I've got 2 different main cutoff switches. And you saw that in my part 3 video where I went over all the components. And this is one example. And this one is pretty much new, and I could probably sell it for a good amount of money. I really like the way it looks. It really looks cool, very professional. And I thought, it's round, what better way to do it? Maybe just put it right here, just on an aluminum plate, and just cover this entire hole and center this in there. And that would look pretty cool too. But then you saw my other video, I have this one, which is similar to the one that came out of there. I've got actually 2 of these. This one here looks like a big circuit breaker, and it's kind of ugly, but in the original spot, because I have a late bay bus, had this, you know, the computer terminal thing, and I went and did this, and I was like, ooh. So again, I'd have to create an aluminum plate that bolts between the original bolts, but then I wouldn't have to drill or tap any holes in the body, because I'd use those original bolts for the aluminum plate, and then the aluminum plate would then have a cutout for the switch, and this switch bolts on. Sorry, I have one-handed, I can't show you, but that switch bolts on to these holes right here. And there is the aluminum panel painted up and installed, and I think it looks really good right there. There's our main cutoff switch. Then I also mounted the charger over here, and all I really had to do was just bolt it down on the flange over here. I don't know if you can see that. I don't have a lot of light, but I used those nylon spacers and some rubber washers to kind of decouple it. It also needed to lift up just to get it so it's not resting on this lip right here. It's actually above that. It may not come out in the camera, but it actually doesn't touch that. But yeah, it's able, I got it kind of flat, and also all those things bolt through to the bottom. And again, anytime I bolt something through the bottom of the car, I'm using a rubber washer and stainless steel hardware. That way it stays watertight and doesn't rust. I also have the vacuum pump installed. So I've got some self-tapping screws going through the top, and then a couple bolts going through into the fender on the bottom there. Again, stainless steel rubber washers for everything. So I think that's pretty much the video. I'm going to cut it here because I have some ideas on the water pump and the lines and the radiator and everything. So I'm going to do a separate video on the water-cooled system, as well as a separate video, hooking up all the charging apparatus and getting that box ready, and another video coming up on running wiring from the back of the car to the front. In addition, the very next video that I'm pretty much set on doing is, I mentioned something about a command center, but I don't think I explained it. But that will be to mount a board just above the hatch lid here with about 2 inches of space. And basically I'm going to have all of my DC, low voltage DC components, relays, terminal strips, terminal blocks, fuse blocks, all that stuff is going to be mounted up there. And because so much relies on the wiring for the 12 volt, all of those 12 volt pieces will be, coming off the ceiling there and tapping into, like the DC to DC to converter and all those different components. So that'll be perfect to have up there on the top there. And again, the other thing that'll be nice about that is I can remove the hatch lid and be able to access and troubleshoot everything from the top here. So that's why I call it a command. It's like the 12-volt command center, because it'll have all of the wiring where I can troubleshoot and figure things out. So that's going to be the very next video. So I'm going to be starting to work on that, and I'll just cut this one here. And I appreciate you watching. So subscribe to follow along so you can see this project come to an end.